Okay, you have been warned. So I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. Our speaker today is Marlis Humphrey, a well-known genealogist in the Jewish genealogy world. She is a former president of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. She is still the president of the Florida Genealogical Society, even though she has now decamped to, past?
December 1st.
Ah, okay, incoming. Even though, what do you know? She's living in Arizona now, which is a much better choice than living in Florida. They don't have hurricanes and they don't have the same kind of humidity problems. That's my own personal opinion, of course. And she is, in her present incarnation, the reason we have her here today, CEO and president of the nonprofit LVDF Foundation and for LVDF Canada. And today she's going to be talking to us about all the cool projects that are coming through LVDF, including the documentation of Jewish records worldwide. So we will know what records exist for Jewish research, how to access them, and also trying to make sure that they are all saved. So we're going to take questions in the chat during the presentation. After Marlis is finished with the presentation, I will take chat questions first and then take live questions after that if we still have questions. So with that, I'm going to turn off my mic and video, and I'm going to let Marlis take over. Thank you, Marlis.
Okay, let's let the technology do its thing. How are we doing? Are you all seeing the screen?
It's working fine.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Janice, for a great introduction, and thank you to the JGS Oregon for the opportunity to share with you today these innovative tools that you can use for more successful ancestral discovery. We're going to start first with some historical background about the documentation of Jewish Records Worldwide project, and then we're going to look at our methods and our approach for this project, and especially, as we've been going through this project for our own use as well as for use by Jewish genealogical researchers like yourself, we have spun off several tools that you can use to advance your own research. So let's set the stage. The documentation of Jewish Records Worldwide project. It's a mouthful, so we call it DoJR for short. It came to light as an idea with game-changing potential for the field of genealogy during the IAJGS's strategic planning session in late 2016. And the initial idea was for the project was not just part of our strategic planning, but simultaneously, it was instigated by Dr. Sally Ann Sachs, who some of you may know, who is the editor for Avutenu. Let me just say, is the screen sharing working? You guys seeing my slides or my slide notes?
I'm seeing the slides.
Okay, just double checking here. I see we just got a little prompt here out of Zoom, which was kind of curious. Okay, I'm just going to ignore that for now. All right, so let me continue on then. So we were talking about Dr. Sally Ann Sachs. So she, for nearly 40 years, had been editing this quarterly journal on Jewish genealogy, and a lot of these articles were about brick wall breakthroughs. And many of the brick wall breakthroughs in these articles were due to some discovery of some really obscure, unusual record. And it wasn't usually a vital record, a birth, marriage, or death record, but a previously unknown strange type of record. She called them second-tier records, and it might be a record like, say, a conscription list or a school record. So while we were looking at projects where we could use our assets to do something game-changing, Sally Ann was suggesting that maybe what we should be doing is starting a project to discover all these second-tier records, as well as even vital records that may still be unknown or lesser known, so researchers would have more direct records to draw from, because basically, it's through records, oral history, and DNA. Those are the key components of how we make our ancestral discoveries. So the question then is, could we use the army of JGSs around the world, as well as the global experts that convene at the IAJGS conference annually, to assist in discovering these records? And from all of that thinking, thus was born the DoJR project. And what this DoJR project would produce would be a database. The database is specifically a searchable catalog of these record collections, unknown, lightly known, little known record collections. And this catalog is called JCat. So people hear database and they quickly think of searchable databases such as Jewish Gen, JRI Poland, and other databases that you use in your Jewish genealogical research. But that is not JCat. JCat is not a database of records or of records indexes to be searched. It's a catalog of record collections, or think of it as an inventory of record collections, an inventory which can be helpful to those creating databases of records from within collections, as well as individual family history researchers. So in other words, another way to look at what is JCat and how is it different from these other databases is and where it got its inspiration for its name is looking at something like WorldCat, which is a cumulative card catalog across, I think it's 74 or 84,000 libraries worldwide. It's a global umbrella catalog experience. But then it has the search capability like Google, which points you not to the information within its database, but points you to information held elsewhere. And that's similar in the way that Merriam-Webster's routes to roots, if you search her catalog, do an archival document search, she doesn't hold the assets there necessarily. She points you to where they are in the archive. And then it also has more extensive descriptive information in JCat. In the same way that Wikipedia has. So basically, when you look in Wikipedia, you get a good description of what's there. And in this case, it's for descriptive of record collections, those previously unknown and overlooked, in areas at risk and/or areas that have previously been underserved. That is what the DoJR JCat is all about. A typical way that someone would use JCat is to enter a specific town name that you're researching. And so then JCat search results will come up and it'll show you what historical records are available that document lives in that town. And then from there, you can contact the archive or whoever holds the records to access them. Or if they're digitally available within someone's databases, you would directly from the JCat catalog follow a link to the record images within that repository's database. We want to thank you to the IAJGS and its member societies, including the JGSO, for being a part of conceiving, nurturing, and funding the early portions of the DoJR project through its initial proof of concept. For more than a year now, the DoJR project, I guess more than 2 years now, has become part of a standalone organization. It started within the IAJGS, but now it's its own nonprofit, the LVDF Foundation. And it is at LDVDF, the acronym for LVDF Foundation, ldvdf.org, that you will find JCat and more information about the DoJR project. So who are the users for JCat? Well, first and foremost, because it was born from the IAJGS, and at the instigation of Dr. Sally Ann Sack, it's genealogical researchers. That's our primary goal. But also this database that documents Jewish lives is also of interest to Jewish historians, Jewish academics. So we expect there'll be additional users besides the genealogical community for this over time. Another group of users are archivists and genealogy companies and organizations that index genealogical records. Those also are users, potential users for JCat. And what this enables them to do is they're always looking for new collections to add to their catalogs, to acquire the assets, to acquire the actual records. And this information gives them a way to find those potential new collections of interest, or whether they're going to acquire them or whether they want to digitize them and index them. And they also will be able to find out if someone has already digitized or indexed a collection. And that's important so that we can help minimize redundant work within the genealogical community. We spent time fleshing out how this project might work and what it would take. And we had a brief hiatus. And then we came back really early in earnest in 2020 to hit the ground running. This was as the COVID pandemic broke out. And what we did is we set out to conduct a proof of concept. Were there really records out there that were unknown to our genealogy community? We had this premise that they existed. Sally Ann had seen many examples of them, but was this a real problem to solve? And was it a big problem to solve? So with some funding, seed money from the IAJGS, we conducted a pilot project in 2 archives that we thought had pretty much been explored by genealogical researchers. They'd been combed over. If we could find nuggets there, things that had never been discovered before, then we really were onto something. And the 2 archives we picked, there was one in Kielce, Poland, and the other in Mykolaiv, Ukraine. And so we set out with 2 researchers there in 4 weeks to discover, had everything of interest already been discovered there, or had things been overlooked. We called this theory that we were trying to prove out in the proof of concept, the iceberg theory of Jewish genealogy. And by talking to different experts and ultimately confirmed by the results of the pilot project, our estimates were that only about 15% of the records that describe ancestral life are known to the genealogy community to date, meaning the vast majority of the records, 85% of them, are unknown to us. They're hiding in plain sight. They're under the waterline. They're not discoverable as of yet. But what we then did find out was, was this iceberg theory indeed valid? Within 4 weeks, with 1 researcher in each archive in Ukraine and in Poland, they discovered 54 record collections that they thought were previously unknown to our research community. And we looked at the list when they finally came back with their results, and we looked in Family Search, we looked at Jewish Gen, we looked at JRI Poland, we looked at Routes to Roots, all the usual places. And of those 54 record collections, only 2 of them were previously known, and they were in Routes to Roots. The other 52 record collections were not known anywhere. And in fact, those record collections described more than 250,000 Jewish individuals. 8 of those record collections even had Jewish in the title. So why were they not known? Who knows? Just imagine what we could find in lesser visited archives, overlooked repositories, and even in people's trunks and attics. So we were off and running. Records are hidden in plain sight because they may have been mislabeled, misfiled, completely overlooked. Here's another situation of hidden in plain sight. It's because record collections sometimes are just simply not where you would expect to find them. They're kind of like the people whose lives they document. They oftentimes have a diaspora of their own, a journey of their own. In reading the JGS of New York City's acclaimed journal, DeWrote, we learned that they had had a field trip, I think last winter or the winter before now. Time is flying by. I believe it was the winter before last. They went to the Jewish Theological Seminary, and this is in New York City. On the tour, they learned that there were 8 boxes of records from Marseille, France. These were records from the Jewish community from 1819 to 1906, and they included 2 volumes of marriages, 1 volume of births, and an 1847 census. So, what researcher looking for their French ancestors would think to look to the JTS in New York City, to their archive, the seminary's archive for such records? And as a side note, these records, even if you did know they were there, they're handwritten in French, Italian, Yiddish, and Latin, and hence the need for our DoJR artificial intelligence work, which we're going to talk about later. So as we discover these record collections hidden in plain sight for a variety of reasons, and we enter them into JCat, it's not just your typical catalog, which would have, the location of the record collection and a brief description and a title. We're actually providing additional information more than what would be available in a typical library or archive catalog. What we're providing additionally is an assessment of the Jewish genealogical value of the record collection. And that might be, it's qualitative and quantitative. You know, what's the percent for this record collection? What's the percent of Jewish records in this collection? What's the number of Jewish records in this collection? What types of fields of genealogical information are available? Is it a simple list, or is there rich data on parents, birth dates, you know, and other information as well? What's the status of accessibility of these records? That's the type of additional information we would provide. We're also providing connection information that will help basically get further along the accessibility of these records. So where do you get more information about this collection? You know, was there an expert who had submitted the information, or you contact the chief person on staff at the repository? Where do you go to get more information? And what if these records are there, but they haven't been digitized or they haven't been indexed? Where can you go to volunteer to help with that, or to get a specific record collection digitized or indexed? So we would, you know, drive the links down to, you know, JRI Poland or the Jewish Gen Ukraine Research Division or Litvak SIG as appropriate to help get that done for specific record collections within their domain. Note that our project scope is very much at the top of this funnel. These are the steps in making records accessible and searchable. And so what we do in DoJR is just the very first two steps, which is the discovery and the identification and cataloging of the collections. And then we stop there. And we work with partners, or we allow partners or people just to come in, different organizations, such as, you know, the ones named here, and the information in JCat in the catalog kind of becomes a shopping list for them. They are the ones that index records, digitize records, store them, publish them. They will have a description of the genealogical value and the vulnerability prioritization of those records. Are they, you know, are they at risk? Are they in a vulnerable circumstance? So this is a useful tool. DoJR is not doing the work that Jewish Gen or others are doing. What we are doing is providing a tool to help them do what they do. Late this summer, at the conference in Philadelphia, we published JCat for the first time online. And this is just a portion of the JCat database that we've been accumulating over the past 4 years. We've been accumulating countrywide surveys, small ones, but we were reluctant to put those into the full database as its first announced use to the Jewish genealogy community, because if you're not from those particular regions where we're doing surveys, you wouldn't find anything, and then you're not likely to come back again. So for JCat-Phase 1, we're exposing a portion of what we have accumulated so far. That portion has 3 objectives in mind. And the first and foremost is that the people that go there for their first experience with JCat should have a very high probability of finding something for their specific town or area of research. And then the second objective is for us to validate our internal template for JCat, the information that we're collecting about each record collection, each record type. And then lastly, that we develop the database and the user interface in order to accommodate more complexity and variety in JCat record types and repository types than we're showing in Phase 1. In order to do that, it's really critical that we get some early feedback on this small sampling of JCat, if you will, from researchers like yourselves. And so to meet those 3 objectives, we decided to roll out JCat-Phase 1 with compilations of 2 record types, Jewish newspapers and Yizkor books. So you can go right now to, you know, Lador Vidor Foundation website, ldvdf.org/JCat, or up in the menu, you'll see Central in the menu. You can click on the website, you can click on JCat. And there you will find now in Phase 1, more than 10,000 titles available of Jewish newspapers and Yizkor books in the database, all searchable and growing. We have a large queue of more data to scrub and to import, ingest into JCat. So if you look now, look again at some point in the future, because there will be more there to search. You likely will search for a town, a region, or a country to see what newspapers or Yisker books are available. There are many ways to filter your search results. So you can use all the different filters by, is it digital? You know, what's the format? What language is it in? What country is it in? And such. And you can use these in combination. Or just, you know, one filter or none. You can just look at the whole database and browse it as well. So that's a little tip on be sure to look at the filters to have a search. We are surveying, extracting, compiling, and acquiring content from many sources. This is just a small piece of what we're doing specifically for the phase 1. There are less currently, for the first 10,000 plus records, less than a dozen libraries, archives, universities, and meta-catalog projects included. Over time, there will be literally thousands of institutions whose data is relevant to ancestral research that will be included in JCat. We're grateful to these 7 organizations who are the first contributors of Jewish newspaper and Yisker book data to JCat Phase 1. And they represent only the beginning of a large pipeline or queue of institutional contributors. But as you'll see, this early impartial and ongoing catalog of their Jewish newspaper and Yisker book information has produced a JCat Phase 1 database that is, even at its very inception, you know, in this small instance, quite substantial and quite useful. So please try JCat. And don't stop there. Don't just try it, but please give us feedback so we can improve JCat. That's very important. That's a great way to help you, help us, help you, and help the rest of the genealogy community. And if you also happen to know of another collection or source that should be included, maybe it's already in our queue, most likely it isn't. Please use the Something I Know button at the bottom of that page for JCat to tell us about that collection that we should consider including as well in JCat. Okay, how are we doing time-wise? We've got another half hour or so, yes?
You're doing fine.
Okay. If you want to see an in-depth dive on how to search JCat and hear what's coming next for Phase 1, you have the opportunity to talk to the experts, Helen Stein and Eva Radding. They're giving a webinar twice to be time zone friendly, tomorrow, Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and they're repeating the same one at Billy Stein. I don't know what's going to be most convenient for you, and some of you who are well outside of the Pacific time zone or outside of the US, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And you can register for the webinar at the website ldvdf.org/webinar. All right, so we're not going to go into a lot more detail. You can hear it there at that webinar. We're going to talk about some other tools. So let's move on now and look at a couple of checklists that can help you with your research. You can find these on the Lador Vidor Foundation website. If you go to the menu item Impact and under Tools and Resources, and then also when you get the slide deck that we'll make available later, there'll be links on the specific web pages that talk about these that you can just click and go directly to those pages as well. But there will be 2 checklists there, a record type taxonomy and a custodial entity type taxonomy. The first checklist, the custodial entity types, is a checklist that contains all the types of organizations that might hold Jewish records. So how do you use this? When you are stuck with a brick wall, this checklist may give you ideas on where else to look for records. You know, these are the types of organizations. So you'll see this graphic with this list of these 40-some different types of organizations, but further on down on the web page, you'll also find for each of those different types of repositories or custodial entities, a definition, as well as some examples for each type of organization potentially holding genealogical records. So that was where to look. The other tool, the other checklist, is helpful in providing a checklist of what to look for. So this is enormous and growing, and thank you. We fielded this to the genealogy community who, contributed in the first draft a lot of input, and we continue to take input on this. It will continue to grow because there's many record types that are region specific, but at the highest level, this is the 10 categories of record types to look for. So you can drill down on the web page and you'll see, say, not for what we'll look at the institution records type, and within it, there's a subtype that is societies as an institution. And within it, there's these, many record types below, a couple of dozen of society record types that one might find. These are great memory joggers. To date, we've identified, and here's the full picture, 357 unique record types. You can download a PDF of the record type checklist from the web page online. Or, once you have the access to the PDF using your PDF viewer, you can actually zoom in to 600% across the chart to be able to read it easily. So it doesn't just become an eye test. When you go on that web page, further down for all the different record types, 350 some record types, you will see by record type a description for what that record type means. Some of them are very obvious. We all know what a birth record is, but for some records, say there's certain types of, I can't even pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try. But let's just say there's Austrian types of records given the Austrian Empire and how that government evolved. There are certain record types that might be a little bit foreign to you in your research, so that there's meaningful descriptions of some of those as well. But use this checklist for record types to add to your research plan when you think you have exhausted all the available records. There may be other things you haven't looked for. All right, let's switch gears and talk about artificial intelligence. The DoJR project is an enormous project. It's immense. What we're doing is surveying across the diaspora from a wide variety of sources, right? All those 40 some different types of organizations in every country, at the federal level, at the regional level, at the local level, at the individual level, and for all those 350 some record types as they may be relevant to a specific repository. And we quickly realized that there's absolutely just not enough volunteers, paid researchers, time or money to survey the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of repositories around the world. At the same time, we were heartened to realize that many repositories are digitizing collections as fast as they can because they're running out of shelf space. They can't take in new collections until they clear shelf space, and they can't throw them out, so they digitize them. Or they have collections that are vulnerable. They're deteriorating, and so they're going to digitize them to preserve them. So we asked ourselves, where collections are available digitally, can we use AI to automate the survey and cataloging work that a human researcher would do? So instead of sending a person into the archive, we send in the computer, if you will. And that started us down that path of inquiry. And we've collected a group of experts working on such tools in our DoJR AI lab. It's now in its 5th year of operation with much success. It really is the only way. It's a decades-long project no matter what we do, but it's the only way that we realistically, within lifetimes can achieve this. Is we're going to have to be able to scale it by putting the computer to work to automate as much of this as we can. We're in the very first step of what is a 3-step process. We reach the record collection. We read the record collection in its historic handwriting. That is the first step that we have to do, is just to read the record collection. We are using an AI platform called Transcribus. It's online. It's Transcribus with a K. You can find it and you can see what it does. And we are using that platform to be able to read historic handwriting across the diaspora, language by language. Once we can read the record collections in a specific language, our subsequent steps, because remember, our end game is to create JCat entries where we can't, afford to send a manual researcher, and where the collections are digitally available. The subsequent steps are to use AI to do an assessment. You've all seen, discussions about large language models and how they can read something and summarize it. Well, once it's in an understandable language, a computer language, it can then assess and summarize what's in the collection for us. And then finally, the third step is for the AI tool to auto-create the JCat catalog entry with the appropriate template, description, and metadata. So that's what our role of AI is in what we're doing. We've been using the platform from Transcribus. We're doing it in a way that should other platforms evolve, because AI is developing very quickly, as you all know. We're not wedded to Transcribus, but for handwriting recognition specifically, it is the best thing out there. Whatever our learning and model development is for that in different languages, we have it in a way that it can port to future tools. What we've done to date, we have a couple dozen volunteers working in the DoJR AI lab, and they have produced AI models to read historic handwriting across different centuries, different decades, in Russian, Polish, Yiddish, Hebrew, Arabic, and Ladino, which is kind of the weakling in the bunch, because we've been struggling to find Ladino volunteers who read the old handwritten Ladino. There's various different types of flavors of Ladino, as you all, or Solitrio, as you all may know. Any of you have the inkling to help with that? We could accelerate that work as well. And we are also then, when we create these AI models to read these record sets in different languages, we're making our models available for public use by others, and we've made 2 of them available to date. We have a growing number of partners working with us. As an example, we have the Joint Distribution Committee, the JDC. They generously provided batches of historical handwritten Yiddish documents from their archive. In particular, this was a set of correspondence, people writing to the JDC about a variety of matters from all over the world. In the 1939-1941 timeframe, specifically to their Warsaw office. And those records are what we're able to use. If you know anything about AI, AI is trained on volumes of data. And so we're using the JDC's data very generously. They granted us the rights to do that, to train our Yiddish model specifically. And we're doing that, as you saw in the prior example, that's kind of your typical, the way AI works. It works differently with narrative records. That's where it works the best, and the earliest success was with that. But we are now also advancing our models to read not just narrative type records, but also tabular type records. Think like census records, or lists, conscription lists as an example. Similarly, we've worked with the Saul Kaplan Foundation on AI training to extend our Russian language models using records from their catalog, which actually also includes some of the Alex Krakovsky record sets as well that are publicly available on Wikimedia. As we have opportunities to acquire more data to train our models, and as volunteers who know the handwritten language and assist in the training, we've had many others come to us to see, can we help them with their project? And we've done this where it's a win-win. They give us data that they're interested in working on to help improve our model and actually help with training the model. And what we give them back is the use of the model to be able to translate their particular project. In this case, there was an academic that we helped who wanted to translate a 145-page Pincus for the Shtetl Brody. And we were able to quickly train the model because it was only one handwriting throughout the entire Pincus. And it quickly converged, and he was able to very quickly transcribe the entire 145-page Pincus. And another usage, there was a register of Jews who left Baghdad in 1951. There was 40,000 names, all written in Arabic, and we were able to work with a researcher who wanted to make that list searchable and available and accessible. And we were able to create a model that could read the Arabic with his help, and now that is soon to be published. We recently received a request to help a family who has a 2,500-page diary that their ancestor left there, and their ancestor was a survivor from Bergen-Belsen. This is always a partnership. They help improve our model. We help them unlock the stories within these historical documents. They have no way to read with their ancestor because it's all in old handwritten Yiddish. Nobody in the family can read it. But if we work together, we improve our model. They're able to unlock the secrets and the stories from their family. This is an investment that helps us, and it helps many, many others as well. It is essential to making DoJR doable. It helps us to be able to use the computers where we don't have enough humans to survey all the repositories across the diaspora. So we're 6 languages down and many, many more to go. All right, let's look at what we're doing country by country. The very first countrywide survey that we did was undertaken by a group of volunteers in Melbourne, Australia. This is a group from the JGS Victoria. They've been steadily chipping away. Their first tranche was like 5,000 records from one of the first repositories they reached out to, but they have created, using the custodial entity taxonomy, a list of 160 organizations in the state of Victoria that they believe hold genealogical records, and they're moving organization through organization through that list and conducting surveys, and actually at the request of some of the repositories, helping them organize and put into appropriate archival storage the records that they are cataloging for JCat. As the group moved forward through this, one of the first groups they went to was the Victoria B'nai B'rith, who loved what they were doing and has kind of adopted them as now what is a Jewish community history project. This is a great model. And also the Jewish Historical Society that has branches in Sydney and Melbourne has provided archival expertise. So seeing these local collaborations happen is phenomenal, and was started with the very first project, countrywide survey that started in Melbourne, Australia. We've started surveys in Venezuela, in the Netherlands, and even in smaller locations in Sarasota, Manatee, Florida. We had the JGS president there, was very interested. And of course, as you know, that's on the west coast of Florida, and it's hurricane prone area, and a lot of reason to get what they have done, cataloged, and then ultimately preserved. In that case, they're working with the local, they received a grant from the local Jewish Federation. And we recently have incorporated a LVDF Foundation subsidiary for what will be our biggest pan-country survey to date in Canada. And I believe, I don't know that she wants to receive a shout out or not, but the person who's donated towards building that infrastructure, getting that nonprofit set up in Canada to do the Pan-Canada survey is here on this call. And it is really with the foresight, the vision, and the goodwill of people like that we're able to start and tackle these large projects. Specifically for the case of regional surveys, the method we have is a multi-step process in general. The first phase is a high-level survey of the sources, those are custodial entities or repositories. Who holds the records of interest? And that first survey identifies and profiles those repositories with special attention given to describing the circumstances of their holdings, with respect to the record's vulnerable circumstances, or also known as records at risk. So that first survey helps us also then to scope not just who has records that need to be prioritized because they're in some vulnerable state, but also what's the number and size of the facilities with the holdings so that we can then allocate resources, i.e. fundraise for the resources necessary to do the second phase. And that second phase is basically where we go repository by repository, detailed look into the record collections themselves in every facility, as well as assessing the collections of individuals. And this is where we actually create the catalog, JCat catalog entries that will be searchable by you for each record collection of interest as well. The last phase is that in certain cases, before even sometimes the earlier phases are complete, we have seen a situation where records are in such a state or a condition that we need to start sooner rather than later to digitize and preserve those that are most vulnerable. And there, we ourselves do not do that, but we will work with partners and help them fundraise. Of course, we've done the identification of what might need to be prioritized, but we will also help them fundraise towards doing those important steps sooner rather than later. So that's kind of our stages of what we do, especially with regards to the survey work. Not yet officially announced, but officially signed, we've garnered the support of the U.S. Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad. That group is a mouthful. They're an agency of the U.S. Department of State. What we have with them is a grant agreement to support a 6-month pilot project called a Records at Risk Poland project. Now that's that first layer of survey that would help us further scope and prioritize the facility by facility drill down later. Records at risk are, in this case, records unprotected by legislation, could be the archives of businesses, charities, and individuals, any records vulnerable to impending damage or destruction due to natural or man-made disaster or environmental conditions. That's kind of the definition of those things that would get prioritized, but also most important objective is scoping this. And right now we're currently looking specifically for 10 donors at $25,000 a piece before we can start the actual on-the-ground survey work in Poland. If that pilot project is successful, and we intend for it to be because it is so pivotal to ongoing work, it will ease the work we do going forward, we will have the opportunity to do similar surveys with the Commission's support in the remaining 28 countries within their remit. They're mostly all Eastern European countries. And what's special about this is the Commission has bilateral agreements with the Ministries of Culture and Heritage in these 28 countries. So we go in under the auspices of these agreements that have been made with those ministries, as well as our agency or commission within the U.S. State Department, which gives us a good cover to go and circumstance to go in under. This is our rubric. We talked about records at risk. I just wanted to give you a feel for the fact that what we're doing is a very systematic approach. And this is the way that we can basically formularize how we can evaluate and prioritize the various factors for conditions of documents. Are they scheduled for intentional destruction? Are they vulnerable, as we talked about earlier, to natural disaster or an unstable government, or even anti-Semitism? All of these are factors that we weigh and evaluate with regards to identifying what is at risk. Besides collaborating with organizations, there is much to be gained by the Jewish genealogical community working together. And we're starting to do that by providing yet another tool and also utilizing the experts in various aspects of Jewish genealogy to work on something called the Essential Guides. This tool is currently under development. We are producing a set of, we call them Essential Guides for short, but Essential Guides to Jewish Genealogical Research is the full title, and then dash country. What we've done is there'll be a set of these for every country in the diaspora ultimately. And what we've done is we've dusted off the 50 pre-existing country profiles. Some of you who have been doing genealogy for a while have been around to remember, or probably have on your shelf, the Avutenu Guide to Jewish Genealogy. We have their permission to use the 50 chapters, country by country, within that guide as a basis for creating the Essentials guides. So we're dusting them off. They all explain where the records are in that country and what type of records exist. This was published some time ago, so some of the links are broken. Some of the organizations have moved or merged. And of course, then there's new organizations and new record types that we now know about. So we're augmenting and updating them country by country. And our goal is to publish them and keep them online for you to download freely. And we have people currently working on the Canada one and the Netherlands Essentials Guides. The Canada chapter, it started with 8 pages. You can go download it right now, and it's in its raw form, if you will, from the LDVDF website, ldvdf.org/Canada. But we have volunteers across Canada and a much more robust outline that are updating and augmenting this as we speak. We will keep it updated online, and we will do that not just for the Canada draft, but also country by country as we tackle these. Besides collaborating with organizations, well, let me just say, I'm sorry, let me just go ahead now. I want to kind of enlarge what we're doing, that we have been working on records primarily under the DoJR, but I want to explain kind of our fuller mission for Lador Vidor Foundation. It really is at its heart about ancestral research at the core. And we all know for ancestral research, yes, it's about the records, it's about the documents, but it's much more than that. And one can imagine that there's other things we will be doing or need to do in the areas of oral histories, of DNA, location studies, facial recognition. There's other aspects of genealogical evidence that by taking a collected and systematic view, we can bring more to the table for researchers, and we will do that. That's one way to advance ancestral discovery. But also to educate and interest people in ancestral discovery, we need to step back and look at, I'll call that a microhistory, right? The history of our ancestors. We need the related historical context in its larger sense. And gradually, as you look at the individual, you look at the ancestor, you look at the family unit, you look at the community, gradually you're talking about Jewish history and heritage in its larger sense, layer by layer by layer. And so in order to achieve our mission of ancestral discovery for everyone, we really need to take that bigger picture view, and we've provided a couple of new tools that help in that regard. So one is the weekly NewsNosh, and some of you may be familiar with the weekly NewsNosh. It was previously available on the Jewish Gen list. It's a weekly publication. It contains 1 to 2 dozen news items about Jewish genealogy, history, and heritage every week. It's published on every Sunday, and now it is also published on the Lador Vidor Foundation website, and we are gradually also adding all the back issues. The most important thing is that soon, as opposed to having to find it, if you will, or go to the website, we will push it out to you and be able to email it to you directly every week if you so choose. If you're interested in receiving it when this capability is available, go to the NewsNosh page on the Lador Vidor Foundation website and subscribe to be notified when the NewsNosh email subscription is available. Also, at the Lador Vidor Foundation website is a new tool called JDays. JDays is the first ever worldwide Jewish event calendar. So here, I know some of you may be familiar with Conference Keeper, like if you're going to look for a genealogy event, you go to Conference Keeper, and that's a wide tool. It's been available for a long time. It does include Jewish genealogy events, but the vast majority of them are just general genealogy events. This is that for the Jewish world and more. because we are talking about Jewish history and heritage, as well as the beginnings of genealogy and family history. So on JDays, and you can go to the website, ldvdf.org/JDays, or you'll see it up in the top menu. You'll find all sorts of events, webinars, podcasts, film showings that are genealogical, as well as more generally about Jewish history or heritage. And you'll find that tool and several ways to view the calendar and search it. This is the pinboard graphical view. You'll also can view the calendar as an agenda list or as a monthly calendar. And you'll find many JGS webinars listed there like this, and many, many more other related types of events of interest at JDays. So I think we're doing pretty good time-wise. We're about ready to wrap up. So moving forward, we continue to do survey work and to build JCat, country by country, file type by file type, record collection type by record collection type. We are developing AI to automate the work, language by language. And also we are developing our software platforms that all of this runs on. We are still an all-volunteer army, about 40 volunteers in 10 countries, and we are operating on a shoestring budget. With more volunteers and more donations, we can discover more records faster and go further, especially before it's too late, right? We've made a lot of progress, but there's so much more to do in all of these arenas for this big, bold, and essential project. We don't have time to waste. So we had received a 911 email from a JGS president who was concerned about a synagogue folding and if there was anything we could do. And in an article about this synagogue folding, as I was researching it, these words hit me very, very hard. It said more than 1/3 of conservative synagogues and an estimated 1 in 5 Reform synagogues have closed in the past 2 decades. Our Jewish historical records, our Jewish heritage is definitely at risk. We all can't wait. And as Stanley Diamond says, every record counts, including the ones in your own backyard. And that's something to take note of. If there's anything you can do to help with regards to preserving, digitizing, protecting those records, it's important. We had our sense of urgency because of situations like that, but even from the very beginnings of this project, remember we said our very first pilot project, proof of concept, was done in the archive in Mykolaiv, Ukraine. And, that's where we found many hidden in plain sight records. And we were also given at that time advice from the researcher that there were many, many more record collections like that. Also, they suspected hidden in plain sight, ones we didn't know. Given more time, we can catalog all of those, but will it be too late? You can see this is some of the early damage to the archive in Mykolaiv that happened after our pilot project. In 2021, a fire ravaged the archives in Krakow and also a fire in the Cape Town University Library. I can tell story after story about that. And even here in the US, we tend to think of these disasters happening offshore. David Rensher, the Chief Genealogy Officer of Family Search, reminded me, for those of you that lead JGSs in the US, he said, do you know that of the 3,200 counties in the US, 640 of them are considered burned counties, meaning they've suffered significant damage to historical records. So, given that sense of urgency and given the size of the task in front of us, what can you do to help? Well, you can use these tools, use JCat and provide the feedback. Use that feedback button. Let us know how to improve it and where else we can find additional assets of interest. You can volunteer. You can go to the website, ldvdf.org/volunteer. Whether or not you know a language, and you can help the AI team with the handwritten records, or there are very, very many different ways that you can help us with our survey and research work, technology work, basic skills, administrative and otherwise, to help us with the project. And also you can donate. And, there's no donation too large nor too small. So go to ldvdf.org/donate. And, we're heading into giving season, and it's been a hard time for, let's say, nonprofits whose mission is preserving our heritage, our documentary heritage. It's not as urgent of a need as the war in Israel, the war in Ukraine, and other things as it should be. But please, if there's anything you can do to help out, keep us moving forward, that would be very, very much appreciated. And I think with that, I think we're call it quits now. Take some Q&A. How did we do?
We can absolutely do that.
Okay.
Let's see, stop sharing so we can see people. We do have some questions in chat, and I'm going to take them first. If you want to put another question in chat, feel free to do so. After I take these, we'll also take live questions. But I put in the first question. Let me go back and find out how I put that question. Okay. Is it reasonable to characterize DoJR as a successor to what Miriam Weiner had done with the Routes to Roots catalog?
We're trying not to be a successor per se, because that would presume that we're subsuming what she has done. In fact, we're trying not to reinvent the wheel, right? But yes, absolutely. The fact that we're creating a catalog, Miriam, what she did is amazing, honestly. She made, I forgot, she told me at one time, 80 some trips, 70 or 80 some trips to the Soviet Union, which was not easy back then, as a lone researcher, and, met facility, archivist by archivist over, I think there's 5 countries in her catalog, and basically, single-handedly pulled that information together. So what we're doing is using a more systematic approach, taking a much, not just those 5 countries and those specific archives, but going worldwide, and using also technology where we can, crowdsourcing, more modern tools to do an even broader look. And also, Miriam gets you down to where in the Routes to Roots catalog, where you go to access this in the archive, what font, etc. We actually want to provide additional information about the record collection, and also to connect you with the resources to do something about making it more accessible. So it's, I don't know if, what did you say, supersede is the right thing?
Well, I said successor, but essentially
Successor.
it's the same type of work.
It
You're
is.
doing it in a more modern, updated way because we have different tools available. You don't have to go in person to all these repositories.
Exactly. So we're taking advantage of what we have available now to do that more broadly, more systematically, more easily.
Okay. With Transcribus, at least that's what I'm assuming that this would relate to. Billy Stein was asking, have you been able to work with the old Turkish Arabic script?
I don't think, not that I know of, but if you have some ideas on what, or some samples of what we might want to work on, we're working on Arabic script, so we know we're doing that. We actually, the fellow who runs the AI lab, Jan Gronsky, he's a PhD mathematics, brilliant engineer in the tech world, blah, 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 blah. But he also speaks 7 or 8 languages. And past several years, he's been teaching himself Turkish, and he's running the AI, and he just came back from an extended trip around Turkey. So if, the timing's right, maybe if we want to launch a Turkish Arabic project and we have some records available to do so, and somebody besides Jan to work with him, I think we could get something going.
Cool. Okay, let's see. Aaron asked, will the organizations mentioned earlier when you were talking about like ones that you've been working with to use AI to look at their items, will they be leveraging this handwriting recognition models to accelerate the record transcriptions? Or do you know if they'll be doing that?
Well, TKF is one organization that has said they're interested in that. I have had conversations with some of the leaders of some of the other indexing organizations that say they are interested in doing it. but we're waiting for the right time. So basically, many of them right today are paying a lot to have records manually indexed, and they're picking up momentum and making progress. But if you could divert some of that funding to instead having those same people that are now partially indexing records instead do the transcription for training the AI model, so then you can get not just an index, but a full searchable, full document transcription at the click of a return key or whatever it is on the computer, click of a mouse. That would be the way to go. But we have had a couple of issues. One is, it works really well with narrative records, right? But if they're the type of records that are tabular, you have to do some tabular layout training and other things. So while we're advancing that kind of state of the art of that aspect, ideally you want to be able to, any type of records you have, you want to be able to feed into the tool and have success. So that's it. The other challenge we have in certain types of records is distinguishing surnames and town names, especially where they are similar to common words. AI doesn't know the difference. And so we're working on some techniques, some very innovative techniques. We're hoping going to produce an academic paper on that as well and help the rest of the world, but we're doing that as well. So as that becomes closer, that people feel that they can get consistent results regardless of what type, we will be, I'm sure, launching more and more projects to help those groups. We're ready. As long as we don't overwhelm Jan Gransky and his team, we're ready to help whomever in starting some, phased projects with different groups besides TKF and others.
I'm going to put my own follow-on question to that.
Mhm.
And I realize that in some ways this is contrary to the way a lot of this work is going these days. But with the concept of doing the every word transcriptions, are indices going to be abandoned? I mean, I'm a professional indexer, and I know from my own experience and also from continuing to keep up with what's going on in the field, they've shown consistently that you will get better results and find what you are looking for more quickly and efficiently if there is an index to something, not just blindly searching as we do with Google and everything else. And essentially, that's what these every word transcriptions are now being used for. Oh, you don't have to create an index. You can just search for your word, but that's not as efficient of a way. So from your perspective with what the organization is doing, are you going to be abandoning indices? Or are you going to use that also with every word transcriptions?
We don't do indexes, remember? The other groups do the indexes.
True.
We just find the collections. But does that mean that maybe they should be thinking about, do we want to do indexes? I think the jury's still out on that one. And so I went specifically and had this conversation with David Renscher, who's the Chief Genealogy Officer of Family Search, because they've been pushing the, pushing the envelope with regards to indexing, auto-indexing via AI, as well as now they have full transcript searchable. So they've got all of that going on their website. So if anybody has a view of, does one mean we don't need the other anymore? He says no, for the foreseeable future, maybe for forever, that they will serve different purposes going forward.
Yes.
So
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay.
It makes me feel better.
So indexes for, a specific, very precise short search easily. But at the same time, what they're finding is with these full text searches, and you can start playing with some of this right now, including Transcribus is being used under the cover on the City Archive of Amsterdam. There's some Sephardic Jewish files there that are full text searchable. But I think you need to be able to speak Dutch or enter in Dutch
What?
to be able
Doesn't
to.
everybody speak Dutch?
Well, and also I believe in Finland there's a group also, the government archive has similar type of search capabilities. So it's starting to appear in public places where you can go do this. Family Search as well has it for a couple of Spanish and maybe one other language where they've made certain data, in English. And I forget, it was probate files in English, and I forget what the Spanish files are and something else, where you can go onto their website and do the full text search. What they found quickly, and I think they might be using some of this for that, what's it called, 10 Million Names Project? Are you familiar with that? Which is basically trying to put names to the enslaved people, right? And so that we can trace their history. That's a big project going on, big collaborative project with the New England
Historic and Genealogical Society.
Yeah, otherwise known as American Ancestors or whatever. So they're doing that project, and with Skip Gates helping as well. And they're using a similar thing. But what they found is that just putting in the name sometimes doesn't help you, especially if it's a common name. But if you can put in not only the name,
Or a
maybe
name like mine, Sellers, which is a word in English.
or you don't know the name, but you can put in something about the circumstance, right? That they're enslaved or whatever it may be, or, on a farm or whatever, words that you think are part of the ancestral condition or circumstance, you can get hits that you wouldn't get otherwise. An index would never find that record outside of it's a probate record, and now you're looking for farms and something else, right? So different purposes, and for now, as much as we know, yes, both
Awesome.
and.
Okay. Billy has asked about the calendar, JDays. Is it available only in English or in other language, and specifically referenced Hebrew?
Well, for now, it's only in English, but I have reached out to, I don't want to mention names. I don't think he's on this call, but somebody, Billy, you and I both know, who would have some experience in multilingual websites to help us. We're using a tool called Talkify underneath for our calendar. And so we're somewhat limited by the capabilities it has, but I think there's more that we can do. And we're also starting to run into situations, and you'll see them when you search JCat, of left to right, right to left languages, and how they get treated differently within the database. So we are at that point where we need to convene, let's call it an experts panel or a few advisors on how to get to exactly that next step. So Billy, if there's anything you can do yourself or to light the fire under the right people to respond to my emails. I know it's been busy and you guys are dealing with a lot over there. So, when the time is right, yes, let's do that. That would be wonderful.
Okay. Susan Goldsmith, essentially it's an appeal rather than a question. As an optimal use of the State Department's Commission for Preservation, will you consider giving priority to Belarus, whose archives are in disarray, whose government is not receptive, where records are very difficult to obtain? Since I have several lines in Belarus, yeah, I understand that thought.
I totally get that. So all I can say is that, what can I say? Is that we are working with the commission. We've had very frank discussions with the commission as to the various circumstances and in spite of bilateral agreements with the Ministry of Culture and Heritage saying we will support what the U.S. is doing to preserve America's heritage abroad. We had discussions specifically about Belarus. They spend a lot of time visiting Belarus, and some of them in their day jobs. These are mostly volunteers on the commission appointed by the president. But there's a lot of knowledge about Belarus there. And they said, let's start with Poland because it's easier. And that's what they said. And so everybody knows the hurdles. They know them probably much more intimately than we do. But boy, wouldn't that be, that's like the big winner, right? Because we haven't been able to do it before. It's been so hard up until now. So we will push for it, but we're going to use them to help us know when to push and how hard to push.
Certainly, while every effort is going to be worthwhile, it's also something on a practical level to keep in mind. Where is the money going to be spent most effectively?
There's a bit of that, yeah, as well, of course.
Well, lots of compliments on your presentation. Penny said that the project is brilliant. Those are all the
Penny!
questions in chat. So now we can open it up if anybody has additional questions. Go ahead and type it in chat or raise your virtual hand, and we'll be happy to take more questions because obviously Marlis likes talking about this subject.
I do. And Penny's been a fantastic supporter. I don't know what we would do without her. And so, yeah, I don't want to out her too much, but thank you, Penny. She's one of those visionaries. There's
We
no
love
doubt.
visionaries.
And big supporters. Thank you.
Oops. Come on. No more questions. Why, hello there, Penny. We see a face. You're
There she is.
muted.
You're
You're
muted.
muted, Penny.
I was hiding because I'm, not exactly dressed for the occasion. But I did want to question. You are so convincing, and it is so incredible what you're doing. Do you have a video to show, like, let's say, that people might be interested if they could possibly hear you personally explaining this, because even I didn't understand exactly what you were doing from the information I received, written information. So does the organization have could they have a video of you to show to people?
So Penny, here's the deal. So yes, you know, what I'm talking about right now, though, is to a genealogy audience, and that's different than, to some extent, from when we're trying to build philanthropic support. That's a different audience,
Yes,
right?
I'm
And
talking about the genealogy,
yeah, but
where it's good to start.
yeah, so we have
Move on.
videos. We have videos on the website. We have one very kind of high level, pull at your heartstrings type one on the homepage. But then on the DoJR page, towards the bottom, are a variety of other past lectures we've given. But I think what we really need, and maybe some help from you and guidance as I would develop it, is something that doesn't require an investment of an hour to sit down and listen to. How many people have an hour to sit and listen? So how do I crisp this up, you know, and get rid of a lot of the, you know, I mean, we expected to spend an hour, right? This is a JGS program, but for most people, for the website and something that you can send people to on YouTube, we need something much shorter. Yes, the detailed blow-by-blow hour for those who really want to invest the time, but we need that crisp one. And
we need the 5-minute elevator pitch, which is long for an elevator pitch, but shorter than a genealogy society presentation.
You got it. So Penny, I don't know if, you know, if you have any free time in the next, I don't know, right now I'm heads down fundraising between now and year end, but early next year, I would love to sit down. Maybe I actually get to meet you in person finally.
I'll be in
Florida. But where in Florida? I'm in Arizona now. I used to be in Florida.
Oh, okay. I thought you were in Florida.
Yeah, now I'm in Phoenix. 40 years in Florida, but now in Phoenix. But maybe we'll just connect up at some point, and you know, whether it's Zoom or whatever. I really would appreciate your input, because you are probably precisely our type of audience who, you know, who has just that level of genealogy understanding, and you're on the board of an archive and other things, so you also understand those communities and what interests and excites them as well. So that's
I didn't
valuable.
understand what you do until today.
I know, but it took an hour for me to get there, and I need to be a lot more. I need to be elevator pitch style. So that's what I need your help with. Thank you, Janice, for suggesting that too. And Janice, you know, if you have any suggestions there as well, you've been around the block on this. You've been doing this
Maybe
for a long
couple of
time.
times.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's always the hardest part. Given enough time, I can explain anything, but who has the time to listen to me? Okay.
That's
what
okay.
else?
We
Thank
had
you,
the time
Penny.
to listen today.
I'm glad for that. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Anybody want to wave a hand virtually and say, hey, Marlis, listen to this? Other than Mary Ellen said, glad to have you in Phoenix.
There we go. And so, yeah, and you all know where to find me. M. Humphrey at LVDF.org, or I don't know, a variety of other things. Marlis at IAJGS.org, and who knows what else. But yes, you can find me. Janice will also tell you where to find me if you have any questions.
You can always email us at jgsoregon@gmail.com, and I will be happy to put you in touch with Marlis. And since no one does seem to have questions, I'll say thank you, Marlis, for your time today and for getting a lot of us at least excited about the possibilities with this. As I mentioned, she did let us record this. We will be putting it on the JGS Oregon YouTube page, which will help promote it also, because it'll be freely available to the world. Aaron, are you raising your hand or are you clapping?
We don't know.
That was a clap. Thank you so much.
Just wanted to
Thank you, Aaron.
Excellent presentation.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Well, a very important project, and we couldn't get there without everybody's help.
Thank you
so thank you for all of that.
Just to let you know, the next couple of talks that we have with the JGS Oregon are both going to be by Ellie Vance, who is with Family Search and has a degree in genealogy and family history from BYU. And they're going to be about using Jews in Russia and using Russian metrical records. So be on the lookout for announcements about those. We look forward to seeing you at a future presentation. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Janice. It's wonderful. And I'm hoping, I know you have given talks on Jewish newspapers in the past. You know, it's kind of one of your pet interests, if you will. please take a look at what we've done.
I
And
have registered for the presentation.
yes, and please, I think your feedback in particular, given all that you know, would be immeasurable into how do we, how do we make this most useful and simple for
Thank you. I
everybody?
appreciate that. Well, I'm looking forward to the presentation. I'm going to be attending tomorrow.
Okay, very good. All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.